Coming up, an exclusive interview with Mark Macarro, the new president of the National Congress of American Indians. We have that interview, plus headlines ahead on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
The ICT Newscast is sponsored by the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, a nonprofit organization serving American Indian nations and people in the recovery and control of their rightful homelands. On the web at iltf.org.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Trahant. We start in Massachusetts, where an effort is underway in the legislature to ban offensive school mascots. Bills in the House and Senate would put a stop to the practice of using names for schools for their athletic teams that denigrate Native Americans. Some 24 schools in the state still use such names, according to the Native American Center of Boston. The bills would require state education officials to bar public schools from using an athletic team name that refers to Native Americans or Native culture. The center's board president says the ban is important for Indigenous youth.
We see that mascots contribute to the detriment of the mental health of our students, and they suffer suicide rates 2 times that of their white peers. And so what we're trying to do is ban these racist images from public schools so that our American Indian, Alaska Native students can thrive within school and beyond.
There's a rock and roll band in Minneapolis that is on a mission, and they're not pretending anything. ICT's Shirley Snavy has the story. Full disclosure, the guitarist is her younger brother.
Kind of like to go kind of tongue-in-cheek with it by saying like we're not pretending anything, because obviously 3 of us are enrolled members of the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, Oceti, Shako, and the 7 council fires. And so we kind of come from that kind of stance when we say pretendians. You know, it's like we're trying to create conversations around racial and multiracial kind of ethnic identity and how that looks today rather than how it looked like before, like we were even born, and how do we express ourselves as modern Indigenous people, and then how do we make sure people understand that they can't just appropriate our culture. They can't just come in and say like, oh yeah, you know, like I really love your culture. I love it so much that they feel like they're a part of it, like they're in some sort of a training program to be Native or something. I'm like 4 years in on a 5-year thing where I'm going to become an honorary Native, you know, member of your tribe. No, we want to talk about our varied like past growing up as mixed BIPOC Indigenous people, and then how we can express our experiences through music, through songs, through lyrics, through the way that we can tell people like we're here, and we've always been here, and we're always going to be, and we have a voice, and you need to hear it. And if you do, you might actually understand what we're trying to say.
We want to play music out as a modern Indigenous group. You know, we like to play rock music. We're capable of playing real traditional items like flutes and drums, but not for this group.
Well, we sing about very specific political issues, Native American issues, and a lot of Native American bands are, well, they're sorry, but it's flutes, or it's blues, or it's rap, and we're none of those things. So we're just a hard rockin' band, you know. Thomas we describe ourselves as Native folk punk.
I had the honor of being asked to do the album with them, so we recorded up at Sparta Sound up in Sparta, Minnesota with our good friend Rich Mattson. I want to say that was about 6 months ago in the winter time, and kind of cranked it out in a weekend. And then ever since, we've been traveling, promoting it, and playing lots of shows around town and in the community. So
We're rock, but we have something to say. This is not just like where it's just everything's turned up to 11 and you can hear somebody screaming, sounds great, but you're like, I don't know what that person was saying, but it was awesome, though, the energy. But I want them to come away feeling both of those, like really hearing good musicianship through Al, Jill and Christine, and but also hearing the words that we're speaking and the messages that we're trying to send, and come away knowing like, hey, this was a great show because we were entertained both musically, but we also heard what they're saying. We actually were kind of moved to do something about it.
The Pretendians Band can be found on Bandcamp and other streaming services. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Homelessness is an issue that impacts every major city in the United States. ICT's Daniel Herrera profiles some of the indigenous people who are unsheltered in Phoenix. Take a look.
In Phoenix, it used to be called The Zone, a makeshift village near the state capitol where unsheltered people created their own community. But after an Arizona Superior Court judge ruled the encampment a public nuisance and ordered the city of Phoenix to remove all tents and structures, the zone is now gone. So, where does everyone who lived here go?
It's a little disturbing. It's a little, it's confusing for people who need services. They're not sure necessarily, where they can go, how long will they be able to stay, what if they're relocated to a different place.
The city of Phoenix said in a press release that more than 550 people in the zone accepted placement in various indoor locations. However, homelessness in Phoenix rose 7% from 2022 to 2023, and that means more relatives being unhoused. According to a report conducted by the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care and Racial Equity Partners in 2021, Native Americans are twice as likely to experience homelessness than their share of the general population. So, what resources are available to them? Amy Schwabenlender at the Human Services Campus, which the zone surrounded, tells us.
They have a place to be inside for 24 hours a day, access to emergency showers, staff that can help with intakes, assessment, what we call diversion, which is a way of potentially being able to reunify someone with family or friends through one-time assistance.
But why is it that Native Americans are twice as likely to experience homelessness at any given time compared to the general population? Jessica Cruz, the Senior Director of Homeless Housing Services and Native American Connections, says it's the outreach system itself.
So it's definitely has to do with engagement, the way that the system is actually created. There is not very much DEI involved, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we, as an organization, have at NEC have really focused on how we put DEI into our practices, including hiring people with lived experience, hiring peer supports.
But not only are Native Americans less likely to reach out for help, but the very tools that are used to measure a person's vulnerability to homelessness have been called into question. The VIS PADT, which has been the main tool Maricopa County has used to measure a person's immediate vulnerability to homelessness, uses a point system with corresponding questions. Depending on the score a person receives, they will receive permanent housing support, rapid rehousing, or no intervention at all. A local Maricopa County presentation in 2019 found significant racial differences in VIS PADT scores, with Black participants scoring more than a point lower than white participants.
So with that, the COC has recently taken a look at their evaluation tool. Before we were using the VI SPDAT, which we understand has some disparities and is not inclusive to our population. So as a continuum of care, we've created a work group that's put together a new homeless assessment tool, and we are running a pilot as a community to better see how the prioritization is really going to capture more of our BIPOC community.
While there are people who say that VIS PADT is a reliable tool or code, one of the co-creators of the index have phased out the tool and said it should be replaced by something better. John Godfrey, the COO of Native American Connections, says the continued underfunding of the Indian Health Services also has a role to play in Native American homelessness.
The Indian Health Services and urban Indian organizations are severely underfunded when it comes to health care. Those people tend to fall through the system. and they end up on the streets, unfortunately, sometimes. And this is a failure of a trust responsibility, right? I mean, so I think there's a lot to say about, having rates that are competitive, making sure the system is fully funded so that people can get the services and access the services. We know that the social determinants of health negatively affect this population more than any other minority group in the United States.
In Phoenix, Arizona, Daniel Herrera, ICT News.
Mark Macarro has served for decades as chairman of his tribe, the Pechanga Band of Indians. This month, he assumed a new leadership role in Indian country when he was elected president of the National Congress of American Indians. I caught up with Macarro last week to learn about his vision for the Congress. President Macarro, thank you for joining us today and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We mentioned on the newscast last week that being elected president of NCAI in a lot of ways is like being the president of Indian country. You're called first to testify. Your words carry great weight both on Capitol Hill and internationally. Maybe talk a bit about what your vision is for that.
Well, the vision here is to reset our footing in Washington, D.C. We really need to reestablish a strong presence in Washington, D.C., inside the Beltway, in Congress, in the administration, and with White House. And so, 90% of life is being present, right? So I think what we need to do, and what I've already talked to our new executive committee about, is a scheduling of a series of meetings between now and the Executive Council winter session in February to reestablish our mission in Washington, D.C. physically, and then to do some strategizing and carry forth, begin to have that discussion about our priorities, especially as we end one congressional year and begin another, and hit the ground running by the time the Executive Council winter session rolls around in February.
Well, one of the challenges of that is you have a Congress that's so divided, and even on really issues that normally wouldn't take a lot of extra thought, there's deep divisions for no other reason than partisanship. How do you get above that?
What has worked in the past, and my approach is this. I present neither as a D for Democrat, neither as an R. I present as an I for Indian country, and the goal is to let those in the House and in the Senate know that these issues are not partisan. Indian country is a trust responsibility that they have when they swore the oath to the Constitution. Upholding trust responsibility to tribes is embedded in the Constitution. It's part of their duty. So we can begin to bring them along that this is a duty of office, of holding office. That's the beginning. Now, the rest becomes a challenge because there is a constant flux of legislators. I want to point out that 36 states have tribes in them. 14 states do not have tribes in them. That amounts to about 156 members of Congress who are from states that don't have tribes. And, a term for Congress is 2 years, right? So there's a constant education of folks that become members of Congress and likely know very little about tribes, and possibly what they know is not accurate or it's distorted. And so we have to educate them, and that's part of being present. That's part of being on the Hill when it matters, when they're in session. So that's going to be a hallmark of what I'm going to bring literally to the table over the next coming weeks, beginning this month, along with this constant flux of members of Congress, and having to go through a learning curve with each one of them. We have champions that are retiring. Mr. Kildee from the state of Michigan is going to be leaving. He has been a champion for Indian country. He's been a go-to. There are a number of go-tos in Congress, and he's been a big one. And so when he leaves, ultimately somebody else should come up to replace him, but we'll be short a champion. And so that further provides a challenge for us to try to overcome, and that makes our job that much tougher.
When you were campaigning for the presidency, you talked about tribes as governments and the importance of that role. Other governments have tax revenue and can use it to fund an array of services. Tribes have to do the same thing without that basis. Is that something that is time to have a discussion about?
Well, it's always on the table for discussion, and really what it points to is protecting funding for Indian country. Now, fortunately, Congress has reestablished funding into the new year, so we're not looking at a government shutdown. But what we are looking at is chronic underfunding of Congress. Of Indian country across the board, in all kinds of program and subject matter areas, and so that is along with all the number one priorities. That too is the number one priority, is to protect the funding that we have, and advocate for a growth of that funding in the short term over the next few years. And then there was the advanced appropriation that was a hard fought victory a year ago. It was in an appropriations bill, so that has to be reestablished annually until we find another place to put it, and we don't have to have that authorized annually anymore. It'll just be a kind of a settled case. But there are plenty of funding issues to talk about and get across the finish line to protect the modest and underfunding gains that are there. So this is a big challenge, especially with this Congress, where those that would like to cut the government down to bare bones. Indian country funding has already been bare bones, and it's not acceptable. And that's part of what we need to be present for is, look, your responsibility, Mr. Congressperson, is to hold your side of the bargain. And under your trust responsibility, under treaties, the funding of Indian country is paramount, and it is a duty. These aren't discretionary funds that Congress can say yes or no to, in our view. And so we need to make that known, and that constant education from there forward is our challenge, and that's what we intend to do.
In a couple of weeks, the White House summit will take place, and it's an opportunity to kind of talk with executive branch about some of these issues.
Absolutely.
What are some of the primary objectives of that?
Well, that's a time when the White House likes to highlight a lot of the positives that it has brought before Indian country and emphasize those. I do believe also new initiatives are often rolled out at that time. So that'll be a chance for Indian country to have a look at what those initiatives are and have an honest conversation or dialogue with the White House, with the administration on the relative merits of those initiatives. And are they hitting the mark with them? Did they leave something out? Because if they do, they will be called out, and we'll have to point, look, all these things, A through E, great. F through M, we need you to pay attention to this. We need focus on this now and over the next 2 years. And so I think we'll be prepared to do that. At this point, we don't have any indication, at least I don't yet, in terms of what will be rolled out by the administration and the various agencies. So, and if we do, we'll let you know. But at this point, we don't know yet.
Tribes have become much more sophisticated in dealing with the global nations. Do you have a vision for that?
Well, in the short term, I do. Along with the short-term mission of reestablishing a strong footing for NCAI and the advocacy, the vision is that, especially under President Fawn Sharp, my immediate predecessor, there were substantial gains made at the UN and with COP, and those gains especially in the international climate discussion, and the role of indigenous communities, indigenous knowledge, especially from tribes in the United States, in terms of helping solve global climate change. Those the entree that we've been able to establish through NCAI and President Sharp, those need to be preserved. And so in the short term, I would look that to continue to protect that seat, the seat at the table that we have at the UN as well as at COP. And I don't think it's automatic that because we were invited or President Sharp was invited 1 or 2 years in a row that stays there as an invite. I hope it does, but we'll find out and maintain that seat so that we have that voice in those international forums.
I want to turn inward for a minute and talk about citizens in tribal communities. Is there some education needed in terms of what tribal people should know about their own governments and their bargaining power?
That's an interesting question there. Tribal citizens should always know where their tribes sit as governments and as sovereigns among other sovereigns. It's a fundamental knowledge base that makes a community stronger. Those tribal communities that understand the things that are ensconced in treaties and the powers that tribes have that begin with the U.S. Constitution, but actually begin before there is a Constitution. Those tribes and those communities, those citizens that know that, empower those particular tribal communities to flex their sovereign authorities and jurisdictions when and where necessary. Sometimes there may be communities that don't understand that, or they don't focus on that, and I think the more that we all do in our individual and that our individual citizens do, all of Indian country can continue advancing and strengthening tribal sovereignty. We speak often in the collective, but the collective is each individual tribal government as like a link in a chain or a patch on a quilt. And, as strong as some tribes are in terms of sovereignty and jurisdiction, there are some tribes that don't appear to exercise that. Either it's a lack of knowledge base or just, doing other things, I suppose. So what we'd like to do is set the stage for tribes to be able to empower themselves, and so we can advance and continue to push positively the boundaries of tribal sovereignty, of tribal jurisdiction, and that in doing that strengthen tribal sovereignty for all of Indian country.
One of the takeaways for me from the Biden administration has been its recognition of talent in Indian country. And it doesn't take long to just see the depth of that talent, that it's really extraordinary. How do we make sure that people, one, know about it, and then two, take advantage of it?
Well, I think that's a role that NCI can help play in letting the world know, letting the United States know that certainly this particular administration has appointed more Native Americans to posts in all agencies than ever before. And there are more Native Americans in these positions, and more Native Americans in top and high key decision-making positions, including the cabinet with Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland. And so if people don't know, some agencies, there are lots of titles and subtitles with multiple names and stuff. But those are meaningful, and people need to know that we Native America have our people in these positions working for Indian country, and so that's a huge positive. As much as has been made public about these positions and our individuals to date, we can do better, and we can amplify that, and so I would look for that to happen, especially over the next 12 months.
Well, just one last question: what excites you most about the next 2 years?
Wow. Every challenge means that there's an opportunity, and I think we have a bunch of challenges coming at us. One we didn't talk about is the upcoming election in November 2024, and how the membership in Congress will be shuffled. But the opportunity, it's work. It's hard work to always be in a position of having to educate members of Congress, but that is exciting work. That's where we get to tell our story individually, and the collective national story. That's a role that NCEI plays. I'm looking forward, and it is exciting to consider that here we are. We get to do this all over again, and we will continue to do that. And it's an ongoing effort. It's one that doesn't end, and we have to keep pushing. We have to keep educating. We have to create new champions in Congress, and because they don't stay there forever, and try to create that base of knowledge for these decision makers who hold keys to our budgets, and in the end, are key to I think safe and healthy communities across Indian country.
President Macarro, thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
ICT invites you to be part of something special. Each week, we're taking on a different topic important to Indigenous people and you, our viewers and readers. Find the link at ictnews.org to sign up for the e-weekly newsletter. It's emailed on Thursdays, and we're covering food, business, economic development, arts, and culture. And for December, we're working on a very special holiday edition on the web at ictnews.org. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.